Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the virtual educational series. This is a special webinar series for looking at security technology for COVID-19. I'm joined by a panel from around the world, as it happens. We have, with my slide here, we've got, I'll come back to that. We've got Darren Banks from CR Kennedy, who's the New South Wales State Manager. Darren, thanks for joining us. We've also got John Davies there in the south of the UK for TDSi. John, thanks for joining us early morning there in the UK. And Mike Monnik, the CTO for DroneSec. We're looking at the drone applications. He's based in Melbourne. Gents, thanks very much for joining us. We're going to come back to you in a second. Just introduce yourselves. For the audience, this is a session where we're going to sort of just get a sense from the audience who we have in the room and sort of who we're talking to. I'm just going to run a quick poll for you before we start. And if you could just fill that out as soon as you can, and I'll launch that now. And we're basically asking, are you an end user, an integrator, installer, or a designer and consultant? And if you can fill that out for us, and I'll get a sense when that's completed. Okay, so it's a bit of a mix. I'll just share that just with the audience there. You should be able to see we've got a 40-40 and 20 split. So 40% end user, 40% installers. Good to see some integrators and installers here, and also some designers. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, we're going to kick off. This covers off some of our channels. We've got a cctvbuyersguide.com, which looks at video surveillance, CCTV, obviously. We also have our Drastic channel, drones and robotics channel, drasticnews.com. So much of what we'll talk about today is available on these two websites, just as a part of our media channel portfolio. And it was the amount of content that we were seeing really that inspired this particular session. And then also some LinkedIn posts from the Gunabo team. I'll thank Christian there at Gunabo, sort of as they were starting to integrate technologies, both access control, video and thermal cameras. Darren, we're just going to start with yourself. If you could just introduce yourself and your sort of scope for this particular panel session. We'll move over to John and then Mike, and then we'll dive into your brief presentation.
Okay, so obviously my name is Darren Banks. I'm the New South Wales State Manager for CR Kennedy. And over the last few months, we've been promoting the temperature monitoring solutions into the wider market. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon is the Dahua solution primarily, but we can obviously discuss the temperature solutions that have been deployed in the wider market as well.
Great, thank you. And John Davies there in the south of the UK?
Yeah. I'm John Davies. I'm the Managing Director of TDSi. We're an access control manufacturer based here in the UK, but we do have an operation out in Sydney and in Brisbane. And I'm going to be talking specifically about what we've done with access control and using access control to track and trace carriers of COVID and who may have been in contact with COVID carriers in order to allow people to have a warm and fuzzy feeling about coming back to work after lockdown.
Right. And Mike?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mike. I'm the CTO and founder of DroneSec, and we are a drone security firm. And so one of the key things we look at is the security use of drones. So hence, I'll be covering some of the applications we've seen from drones in this recent COVID crisis and their incredible effect on the world kind of going forward, and if they'll still be here to stick around afterwards once this is all over.
Great. Look, we'll start off with Darren. And Darren, if you can just cover off, just for the audience, we're going to cover off video surveillance. We'll move into some access control, and there's some integration there with video. And then we'll finish off the discussion with Mike, looking at the drones and robotics. And again, drones and robotics have that application of video and access control. So Darren, some of the applications that CR Kennedy is deploying and sort of developing yourselves?
So, as I said before, currently we're deploying a number of temperature monitoring solutions, obviously standalone or integrated into a wider network. We have products that basically, as I said, are standalone camera solutions. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see the? Okay, so you can see the camera.
We can. It's the Dahua.
Okay, good. All right. So, look, I'm not obviously going to go over the slides and go through all the specs. I mean, you can obviously read those for yourself. You know, obviously this is a big learning curve for all of us. Over the last 3 months, I've had a steep learning curve with regards to thermal body temperature monitoring. You know, this technology came about 17 years ago with the SARS outbreak, and they had solutions deployed back then, but it was very limited in application and deployments. With the advent of COVID, we've seen this technology take a massive step or a massive leap into the market. The Dahua solution, the newer solution, was developed or released January this year in Australia, and obviously it's gone from strength to strength. They released their first camera, and since then we've already had an update with better resolution on the thermal sensor, more measurement accuracy, etc., etc. The Dahua solution is deployed as a bullet camera, which you can see on the screen. And then in conjunction with the bullet camera, we also deploy what they call a black body reference unit. The concept behind the black body is that it is a constant reference point for the camera to look at with a constant temperature. So the black body is set at 35 degrees. It's set at about 3 meters away from the camera at a height of about 1.8 meters. And that way the camera doesn't really look at the ambient temperature of the room. It measures against the reference point. If you're not using a black body, then you have to set the ambient temperature of the area the camera's been deployed in. And depending on where it's been deployed, that ambient temperature can fluctuate quite severely, and therefore will affect the accuracy of the temperature being detected on the person walking through the scene. Hope that makes sense. As I said, the Dahua solution can be deployed as a standalone solution. So camera, black body on a couple of tripods. You can put an SD card straight into the camera to record, and then connect up to the web browser. And it's as simple as that. It's there's obviously set distances between the camera and the black body and set heights, but it is a very simple solution to deploy within 30 minutes to an hour maximum. If you want to take it further, you can use the Dahua AI NVRs, and basically what they will do is record and report all the alarms, and you can connect screens to them so the public can actually see themselves on the screen as they walk through the view as well. It's a more robust solution with the NVR deployed with it. And the NVR, with a 16-channel NVR, you can run up to 6 cameras off the same NVR. The added benefit of that is that you could actually add a people counting camera, so you can count people in and out of the premises. As we saw with the likes of supermarkets, where you had staff standing there with counters, counting how many people entered and how many people left, so that you wouldn't have any more than 100 people entering the store at any one time. That's a rough indication or a rough image of how the system's deployed. So you have your thermal camera looking at an entry point. You have the black body. As I said, the camera can be connected up to a web browser, directly onto a laptop or a PC. There is obviously the Dahua software that can manage it as well, or the NVR. The camera on board has alarm indications, so it'll give you a visible light and a sound if there is a high or abnormal temperature. And basically, if you get an abnormal temperature, then we advise that there is a secondary screening method where people can be screened by staff with thermometers, etc., etc. What we need to understand and be very clear about is that this system is deployed as to detect abnormal temperatures. It is not a medical, temperature checking device. It is purely and simply to allow people to know that potentially someone has an abnormal temperature and that they need to be taken for secondary screening or, asked to leave or whatever the process is of a business. And that's basically it for the Dahua solution. There are other solutions on the market. So, obviously there's a number of manufacturers out there promoting solutions. The Dahua solution allows you to have non-contact screening. You can screen a number of people in one hit rather than a one-to-one. And there are other solutions, i.e. tablet solutions, etc., where you can have a one-to-one where someone walks up to a tablet, looks at it, and the temperature is scanned, and either an alarm or no alarm goes through on that. From my perspective, that's really it.
Thanks, Darren. Just a couple of questions. We've got one, the manufacturer for Dahua cameras, they're Chinese-based?
Yes, they are.
Yep. With the interpretation of the image, you've got the option, and I'll swap the screens back if you like while we're there. We've got the option. So that first one, when the camera is just set up on its own, is that a human interpreting the image, or is the camera actually saying what the temperature is, and then you can set an alarm based on that, or do you need the AI in the NVR?
So on the camera itself, it has what they call a high temperature mode, and you enable the high temperature mode, and the temperature is displayed both on the live image and the thermal image above the person's head. It is an AI indication, so it is actually the thermal camera that's detecting the forehead temperature. The nice thing about this with the Dahua solution, it only detects the facial region, so it does facial detection, not facial recognition. So if somebody walks into the scene carrying something hot like a cup of coffee or anything else, it won't alarm on that unless you place that hot sauce in front of the forehead. Which obviously.
So if you're wearing a heat, so don't wear a heat pack on your head.
No.
There's some others. What about if you're wearing a mask on that particular camera?
So with the Dahua solution, you can actually wear a mask, you can wear a face helmet, you can wear a hat, and it will still detect the temperature. We've tested it here. So all of the CR Kennedy officers have deployed this solution across Australia and New Zealand, and we have them set up here. So we've actually rigorously tested the solution ourselves. Our staff go through the camera every day. We go and grab hard hats and masks and other bits and pieces, and we'll actually walk in front to see how accurate the solution is. And to be honest with you, it seems to work exceptionally well. And obviously, we don't have a medical grade thermometer standing by to actually go and check people's temperatures. But from what we're seeing, the indications we're getting, it works exceptionally well.
And I suppose one other question is, we're obviously here in Australia. We've got John there in the UK we'll come to shortly, but the deployments for these and the kind of the end user inquiries is something from the market you're seeing they're looking for?
Yeah, look, we've had a lot of success deploying this solution ourselves. We were one of the first to sort of go out to the market and deploy these a few months ago. We've had a number of healthcare facilities taking these products on board. We've also, where we had the abattoirs that had the issue recently with the mass outbreak of COVID, we actually deployed this in a meat processing facility about 2 months ago that had 4,000 staff.
Yep.
And they were running 3 shifts, and we had these deployed on their 3 entry points, and it's worked exceptionally well there for them. So yes, we've had great success in deploying the solution, and there's been no negative feedback to date.
I think for those visitors, so those sort of viewing this from Asia, they'd be used to seeing this at the airports, and I think giving an Australian context, it's not something we're particularly used to. And just to remind the audience, we're not advocating any particular products or cameras here. We're simply looking at the technology being deployed in a COVID environment. Up on the screen, and being with the media side, we're getting inundated almost daily now with the amount of solutions coming through responding very much on this go. So we saw the Dahua cameras there from CR Kennedy. We're seeing solutions coming in from the likes of Indigo Vision, and those cameras look very similar. So there'll be OEM cameras. 1 second. This is a D-Link camera, and again, D-Link are doing a lot more home surveillance as well. But this technology mixing a visual camera with a thermal camera, and then with the traditional facial recognition and the like. So there's a lot of integration moving on in this particular field. And again, I'll give Eddie at Vital Protection Group a plug, who just came out with this today. So they do traditional sort of weapons access control and are now deploying, and they've looked to deploy thermal related cameras along with that. Before we move on to the next one, I'm going to hand over to John. John, you're running some interesting applications, particularly around the track and trace and the access control. So now we've got the thermal cameras. Maybe talk us through the access control applications that this provides.
Okay, on the thermal camera side of things, there's a good link from what Darren was talking about and what's happening in the access control world. And just for the audience, looking at the Dahua camera, that is actually being deployed by Amazon in all their offices worldwide. I think it was announced a couple of weeks ago that they purchased 1,500 Dahua cameras for deployment across the world in all their offices. So we've been working as an access control company with Dahua, with Hikvision, to look at how access control and these thermal screening cameras can work together. And what we've done in our system is that you can enter the camera IP address, and then once you've done that in our software, you enter the threshold that you're looking at. So yeah, you're going to tell the camera, okay, I want to know if someone's coming through with a temperature more than 37.5 degrees or more than 38 degrees. Then you put in an offset measurement. So Darren was talking about using a black body. The Dahua cameras are accurate to plus or minus 3 degrees. If you're not looking at using or deploying a black body, you want to know what the ambient temperature threshold or offset should be. We can put that into our software, so we can try and get as accurate a measurement as possible. Once we've done that, you associate that camera with a particular access control reader. And then you go into the software and you define the actions on the reader. So you say, okay, I don't want this reader to check the temperature, or I just want to control and store that temperature reading, or actually I want to take the temperature reading, and if it's above the threshold, I either want to send an email to someone saying, yeah, you've got a high temperature, or actually deny access and say, you actually need to go off and go and see a security guard because you're not coming into the building.
John, you've got some slides there. I did try to share that with you. Have you got?
Yeah, I shall go through. I'll go through the. So once we've done we've done the integration now between access control and the thermal imaging side of things. But another thing that's happened, we were reading about these mobile phone-based track and trace applications that were being deployed in Korea and in Singapore. In Singapore, there was only a 20% uptake from the population as to downloading this track and trace application on their mobile phone. And there was a big debate in the UK when we went into lockdown. Said, okay, well, what do we need to do when we're coming out of lockdown? How much of a comfort factor do organisations need to have, because they have a duty of care to their employees? But more important, here in the UK and across Europe, it's not so much FOMO, fear of missing out, but it's FOGO, it's fear of going out. People have been locked down for so long that they're actually frightened of going out. They're actually frightened of going back to work. They want to know, and they want their employers to prove to them, look, we've made your working environment as safe as possible. But then on the other hand, yeah, if people are using the mobile phone app, but there's only a certain percentage of people doing that, then there's a bit of a disconnect. So what we've done is actually put a track and trace application together. So I should just go through the slides here. Okay. So basically, the companies, we asked ourselves, what are companies and employees looking for after, to come out of lockdown? And in the UK, we only came out of lockdown officially yesterday. Yeah, so basically, they're looking at providing a safe environment. So our track and trace application assists in tracking and tracing people within an organization who've come into contact with people who have identified themselves as being infected. So someone's got a cough or a high temperature, or they lose their sense of taste, they call up the office and say, look, I think I've got COVID, I'm going to go and get myself tested. Then the organization can use this application within the XGuard software suite to actually then look at identifying who that infected person has been in contact with, in order to then let those people who have potentially been in contact with them to go and get themselves tested. So it identifies who an infected person has been in contact with, and it allows the organization to review which key holders and card holders have used readers within a set time frame, because there's been a lot of debate as to, okay, if you've got COVID, how long does the virus last on a surface? So organizations are going to be saying, okay, well, yeah, we're going to be sending people around to disinfect doors every 2 hours or every hour. So you can use our software and say, okay, well, if someone's identified themselves as a COVID carrier and they've gone through doors 1, 2, 3, and 4, then we want to know who else has gone through those doors within an hour, because we've got an hourly cleaning regime, or within 2 hours if it's a 2-hourly cleaning regime. And then it'll come up with a list of people who have been through those doors who potentially actually picked up the virus from the person who was infected. And then you've got a list, and the organization say to them, look, yeah, you've been through a door where it's known that a COVID carrier has been through. It's likely that you've picked up the virus. We recommend that you go and get yourself tested. So that's what happened. So our goal basically was to equip organizations, as I said before, that have got a duty of care to their employees, to enhance that organization's ability to ensure that staff are quickly notified that they may be or may have been in contact with someone who's infected, and it enables shorter delays of staff submitting themselves for testing. And that's the whole thing about making sure that lockdown doesn't come back for a second time, is making sure that countries have got the capability to test as many people and get those test results out, so it keeps the R value below 1. That's the big thing in the.
Can I just ask a question there, John?
Yeah.
This application is to those that don't necessarily have an access control application already. I imagine most ACS.
This application is for people who are actually running TDSi's XGuard software. Okay.
Got it. Sorry.
So
okay.
What we've done, so we've developed the application, and we've gone out to all our software users all across the world and said, we've developed this application. Here it is. It's free. Download it. Because as an organization, we believe, we want to give something back. There are other things that we're doing that are COVID related. So with respect to integration with the thermal imaging cameras, or looking at readers themselves that are face detection readers with a thermal capability. We sell those products, and those readers that we manufacture, they're agnostic. They'll work with our access control systems, but they've got a standard Wiegand and clock and data output, so they'll work with anyone's access control system. But what we've done with our software, actually, in my mind, I know that any access control company across the world can do the same thing. It's not difficult. So if you're not using a TDSi access control system, yeah, go and talk to your maintainer, go and talk to whoever manufactured that access control system and said, listen, if TDSi can do this and we can do it, and we did it in 3 weeks, you can too. Because ostensibly, yeah, what we're doing or what we've done, it's a database inquiry. Yeah. That's all it is. It's a send of SQL commands. We want to know, you know, who's been in a door or an area through which an infected person has been. So any access control company should be able to write this.
Well, so far it's the only track and trace within a building that I've actually seen sort of promoted.
Yeah, we are the only one that's actually come up with it. But
yeah.
and the impetus for us was that, yeah, there was such a slow take up of the mobile phone based system. And the same thing, and what we wanted to do, we have a passion and purpose in TDSi that we want to deliver peace of mind, and I just thought to myself, how can we enhance and deliver more peace of mind to people who have got this FOGO thing, have got the fear of going out, that just don't want to move on, and we need people to move on because, you know, economies have just that they're on hold and it can't last forever. We need to move forward.
Yep, very much. Well, look, thank you very much for that. We'll continue on. I suppose maybe a bit of insight to finish off on what you're seeing in the market in the UK compared to what we've seen here in Australia and maybe APAC. I imagine it's very similar. You're finding the market's very responsive to this type of technology now.
Yeah, the market across the UK and across Europe is very responsive to deploying cameras with thermal threshold monitoring techniques, deploying these readers. So we've got a reader ourselves that we're launching. This is, I think, from Uniview in China. We've got a reader that we're launching next month. It's called ViewPass, but it's a similar technology. It's a facial detection system. And it's a forehead temperature measurement system. Right. One of the things that's happening in the UK as well, I don't know whether your Indian audience are familiar with IPVM in the United States. They're an organization that do a lot of testing. They've just yesterday launched a report on the Dahua camera. Very, very good. Got lots of glowing reports. Not so much glowing reports for Hike Vision, because Hike Vision are actually selling the idea that you don't need a black body, but you actually do need a black body. Why they would do that, I don't know. And yeah, I think you had a picture of a D-Link camera. Well, that's the Sunell camera. So those are the guys that make it. So, and also there's an interesting thing that's happening. That IEC are actually looking at developing a standard for fever screening. And that's a very interesting document looking.
Well, I think they've subscribed reports, but if you've got some links to those, John, send them through and we can put them in the notes for this particular session.
Absolutely, because all these reports that I've just shown now, they were just released yesterday. So but then you can, the subscription to IPVM is not much, it's $20 US.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so, but I can put links on the thing for that. No issues.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. The slides that we've got up at the moment, this one's from TerraVision. Again, one of the other sort of aspects of access control, particularly say biometrics, fingerprint readers, and the like, will be phased out quite quickly, I would imagine. And they're now moving to this contactless access control for buildings. This one is TerraVision, some facial recognition and the temperature management for access control. And again, Gunabo have similar installations like this. Just run through these with John, and we're going to hand over and dive into my favourite area is drones and robotics. Mike, maybe if I hand over to you, if I go back, that way I won't ruin your introduction. And let me share over to you, and we'll dive into how this technology is also being integrated onto drones and robotics. Over to you, Mike.
Sure. I'm just waiting for the pop up here. So
here it comes.
Yeah, I've got it now. So thanks for that. And yeah, John, I thought that was quite interesting because it seems like you're doing contract tracing on almost a micro scale. So something like that in my house would be pretty good as well. Now, can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Looks good, Mike.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I'm going to cover some of the drone applications we've seen with COVID. And I guess to give you the backstory of why it's applicable, DroneSec comes in because we are quite literally a drone security company. And so part of our process is actually monitoring drone incidents, by which some of those include incidents including COVID-19 and the uses for them. So very quickly, we're based in APAC, but we do serve the world globally, and we do have very much a deep kind of technical and security background. So things like AI and flow-based systems are not new to us, and we've used them before in many types of exercises, whether it be using drones to assess if we can break into a power station or a perimeter or something like that. And now we're seeing that gigantic change to law enforcement using drones, but for another use, which is COVID-19. So I'll talk to you a little bit about our threat intel platform, but part of that reason is because we were logging incidents before COVID-19 started. So we actually have a really good data trail to be able to go back and look at the changes that we've seen and the number of incidents involved in that. So just very quickly, we do focus on the consulting side as much as our which is why it's involved in COVID-19. But I can't say it's something we were necessarily prepared for, but we've been lucky enough to see that small uptick. So I don't want to go into depth about how we monitor them or what we do, but I do find it interesting that we were actually in Singapore for the air show just as COVID-19 was kind of slowly breaking out. And we actually gave a talk there using COVID-19 contact tracing as an example of how we collect drone intelligence. So, there's an incident by law enforcement and we log that and categorize it, or there's an incident that is logged by a member of the public and we're able to catalog that. And then we can compare those incidents and trace them back and see if there's any patterns and things like that. And what's interesting is the whole concept of contract tracing is to go back and see what happened and then ensure that that doesn't happen again, right? You don't make that same mistake again. And so that's what we do with the threat intelligence. And previously it was for non-COVID-19 things. What we're finding more and more now is we're seeing things like we can assess how many law enforcement agencies in the US have, say, received drones because of this new situation. However, then them being able to use that from now on. So you kind of think about one or two things, like if they're using drones for surveillance or for assessing people in an area and how many people there are, or using FLIR cameras to check the temperatures, what does that mean for when something like COVID moves on, right? Are they going to just keep those drones or are they going to move? And one key thing as well is just the interesting perspective of some of these security groups coming out and saying, we never signed up to monitored surveillance where we haven't said we're happy with that. And we also don't know how long those images or that footage or things like that are going to stick around for. So it's a bit of an interesting, back and forth where we've got this incredible new technology, but at the same time, it's kind of shadowed by, we're doing all this for COVID. When does the butt stop? So I'll speak a little bit about that towards the end. And if anyone is interested, from late December last year, we were tracking every single week the incidents related to things, and we've gone back and looked at the increase in incidents. And per day, we were roughly 4 incidents per day. Now we're seeing roughly 5 to 6 drone incidents per day, and we're having to classify: is it an incident when it's used by, say, law enforcement, or is it an incident when it's not used by law enforcement for COVID tracking? So we do offer this free. You can go find it, that link I've got there, and you can go back and look in the drone technology section. Each week we logged different applications and uses and things like that. But I am just going to quickly speak to that. So I'll stop sharing my screen there for a second, and tell me if you can see my face again. So I guess one kind of key thing is, I'm not showing my screen. Oh, great. A lot of people are looking at drones application of COVID, such as deliveries and just analyzing how many people are in a certain area. But it kind of goes beyond that. We've seen drones being used to spray certain areas with disinfectant because of their payload capacity, because they can reach rooftops and places where humans or people struggle to get there. But also, it's not just the deliveries. We're seeing testing kits being flown over the channel between islands and the UK, where a helicopter would take a lot more fuel and manpower. So it's definitely speeding things like that up. We're seeing drones that have loudspeakers attached with FLIR cameras, and they're able to warn people when they're in an area that they shouldn't be. And even to the point of people taking it into their own hands. So there was a gentleman in New York who attached a loudspeaker to, and he went into the New York park and started yelling at people to stay back. And he kind of took the law into his own hands. So it now is in the power of the everyday individual as well to do that. So we're seeing some interesting things around that as well. I think this technology is incredible in those acts. I'm not going to go on too much because I have taken up my time before we chat about it in depth. But just to add a security element here as well, that I've noticed is that in the past, for those of you who know what counter-drone systems are, or the anti-drone systems, they focus on taking drones down when they're in a hotspot or a place which is classified as illegal, right? And previously, this was prisons and airports and military bases. And what we are seeing now is this crazy change to what is being defined as a high priority target. So what has been renowned as being wanted to be protected recently is the USNS Mercy and Comfort, the two US ships that are currently doing life-saving equipment in the US. So they're changing their priorities to protecting healthcare and medical facilities over that of airports or prisons, because that's how quickly the threat has changed. So a drone getting in the way of an emergency helicopter or life-saving equipment is now more important than one at an airport because of the restriction of flights. So that's just some interesting kind of things I've seen with COVID-19 technology in the recent past. I can talk about it all day, but I'll let us get back to the panel, and maybe we can flesh some of these issues out.
Thanks, Mike. And I think you've raised a good point in terms of the countering. Darren and John, maybe I'll come back to you in terms of the technology being deployed. Is there potential vulnerabilities in this if it's used as an access control? Obviously, the traditional security application needs to be there, and this is on top of, and then becomes almost a hybrid system. Is there potential vulnerabilities, false positives? How much, and a distraction to the security personnel who were traditionally there as security, now they're there almost as sort of health monitoring. How are you finding the end users and the clients getting the balance right?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yes.
I think any technology can be used for nefarious means. It can be overused. It can be used to spy rather than to help deliver a solution or to provide safety. And I think the deployment of the technology, any technology, has got to be driven by some kind of ethical mindset where you're not going to go and step too far. And if you can't rely on personal ethics, that's when governments step in and say, this is okay, this is not okay. But I feel that we're getting into an area, and the industry has for the last 4 or 5 years, where we're not just talking and delivering security systems anymore. We're actually our customer base as security manufacturers. We're talking to different people within organizations. So CCTV systems and access control systems are being used by marketeers in the retail sector. Looking at heat maps and footfall counts and monitoring sort of point of sale or digital displays where new marketing messages are pushed out in the retail environment. and marketing companies can actually say, okay, I put a new advert on in a shop. Is it driving people to the area where I've got the offer on? And if it's not, what's wrong with that ad? So there's a lot of cross fertilization of the information that is traditionally been in the security sphere that is being used by other silos within the business. And I think we've just got to look for those positives and actually accentuate the positives rather than saying, okay, yeah, there could be negatives, but yeah, if you've got the checks and balances in place, yeah, you're going to be safe. But let's look at the positive applications here.
I think that's again why we sort of brought this panel together, is we do see the diversification of security technology, and COVID is a sort of a glaring example of that. In terms of the hybrid model, Darren, in terms of, say, CR Kennedy, probably one of the biggest in Australia in terms of the suppliers and integrators, is this where you see it moving into the foreseeable future? Mike touched on post-COVID. We might not see a post-COVID. This might just be the new normal for the foreseeable future. You know, and once it's embedded, it's hard to pull it out.
I think if you look at the current deployments at the moment of the temperature monitoring solutions, a lot of those have been deployed as standalone solutions initially, right? But I think, you know, from talking to integrators and end users, there is definitely a leaning towards integrating these into wider solutions. Because at the moment, as deployed as a standalone solution, you have to have someone there monitoring the solution. When you look at, you know, the access control side of it with John, once you deploy these where a camera can, you know, a temperature solution can indicate to an access control solution that potentially someone has a high temperature, lock down a reader or a door, and then that person has to go and go to another area to basically have a secondary scan to be released or whatever. You know, it will complement each other all the way through eventually. But I think right now we're sort of playing catch up with the market. As I said, you know, I only started playing with temperature cameras 3 months ago and trying to get my head around it and trying to understand the technology and how best to deploy it. And also listening to the end users. You know, I've been surprised over the last few weeks by talking to end users and how they see these things being deployed and understanding their requirements, their wants, their needs, and how to tailor make the solution to suit them. I think as we get better at this and as we understand the technology better, and as the manufacturers, you know, develop the solutions that are more robust. I mean, as we were saying, I mean, if you look at Dahua as a really good example, you know, within 5 months, they've released the third generation of camera with better resolution, better performance. You know, we've got the argument between black body versus no black body, what the accuracy is, et cetera, et cetera. So I think as we get better at this and the technology gets better, then the integration will work a lot smoother and integrators and customers will become more used to it, and then we'll see it deployed on a wider scale.
Yep, sounds like it's getting embedded. Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, I actually wanted to reply to that, and also, I guess, Darren, ask you a question based on what you were saying at the start. In terms of these cameras, say, you know, existing from now on at, say, airport screening, you know, I know when I've gone to Singapore or South Africa, pre-COVID, they always had these type of, you know, infrared and thermal heat cameras. And then it begs the question, what Chris said about, you know, Australia not necessarily having these heat cameras when you come in. And I guess I can align that to, you know, we're seeing places like, you know, the Philippines start using drones with thermal cameras right at the start of this crisis. And some of their cities that have been using them have zero, you know, whether that tested them or whatnot, they have 0 cases. So I guess my question to you is do you think countries with these systems in place already are faring better, or is there any evidence to that? Or do you think it's just a case of they maybe didn't have the right systems? What is your thoughts around that, the countries who were using it versus those who weren't pre-COVID?
I think that's really hard to answer. I mean, if you look at Singapore as an example that have had, you know, thermal cameras deployed for a number of years because of the SARS outbreak and everything else. I mean, Singapore got hit reasonably hard with the COVID virus, and it wasn't until they sort of locked down and did sort of what we're doing. And then, of course, now they're worried about the second stage, you know, it happening again as they release people from isolation, etc. I think these cameras moving forward and this type of technology will better arm us and at least give us some indication that potentially someone does have a higher than normal temperature. But it's what we do with that information and how we act on that information that's going to be critical. Because realistically, someone comes through with a high temperature and we don't do anything about it, or there's no legislation in place to say, well, you can ask that person to leave the premises, or how do we now react with the public? It's easy going into a private premises that someone owns an office and they say, well, if anyone comes in with a high temperature, they have to leave. But how do we enact that into the wider environment?
It does potentially create liability issues if you're detecting it but then not acting on it. I suppose it is one of those other, what vulnerabilities are we creating, or are we creating another headache? Look, I think we'll stop it there. We might finish off with some closing comments, but I've had this slide up in terms of a summary. Very interesting in what we're seeing in Singapore in terms of the robotics, the Boston robot, the Boston dog. I think it's probably a bit of a marketing ploy for Boston, saying here you can have a dog roaming around your park. But I think, and also the track and trace technology on populations around the world, there's been a lot of pushback. I hear pushback in the UK, but here in Australia, the take-up has been quite strong. So I think population, their feeling around surveillance and tracking technologies has also shifted, and whether that is sustained over a longer period of time. And I mentioned the privacy sort of advocates today saying drones shouldn't be getting used. This debate and these hybrid models of security technology being applied in a COVID environment is definitely something that we'll be monitoring over the rest of this year. I think at least with the courtesy, I'll give you all an opportunity, at least some closing comments on just general security technology for COVID. And I'll put it out there, welcome to make one or two predictions as to what you expect for the remainder of the year. We'll start with you, Darren.
Look, I think as we come out of the lockdown, we saw a surgence at the very start of this for temperature screening devices. We locked the country down. People left offices. We closed restaurants, pubs, clubs, etc. We saw it sort of quieten down a little bit. I think as we come out of lockdown and we start to return to work, we will see an increase in duty of care that people will want to put in place to monitor their premises. So we will start to see these cameras and the technology take off more across the nation. And I think potentially it'll be around for quite a long time to come.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Thanks. And John, in the UK and the UK perspective?
Yeah, I would reiterate what what Darren has just said there. It's I think also Darren made a very interesting point before about manufacturers changing the way they engage with end users. So I think we're moving and are moving from an era where manufacturers and technologists are talking at their customers and saying, hey, I've got the latest whiz bang, it does this, 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 and this. And then what Darren was saying, actually, what you need to do is actually talk to your customers and actually understand what issues they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and how you apply that technology to actually solve a problem for a customer. And that's what's happening in the COVID world now. And I think people, as we come out of lockdown, they are frightened about going out, frightened about going back to work. Governments are very wary about second waves. So anything that we can do in the security and the safety industry to actually enhance organizations and the government's ability to keep a track of people. So now everyone's squashed the curve. We're getting the number of cases down. Now we can get into a place where we can actually start tracking and tracing and keeping a track of it, and we can keep that down. And that needs to happen until there's a viable vaccine that comes along. And there's a lot of work. I think that there are about 80 companies looking at different vaccines at the moment, but it might be here at the end of the year. It could be another year. It could be 2 years away. We don't know. And we need to make sure that as technologists and suppliers of technology, that we enhance our countries and the organizations within our countries, enhance their ability to actually resume some kind of normal economic activity. Otherwise, we're just going to go to hell in a handbasket.
Fair enough. And Mike, from the drones and robotics perspective, or your own perspective, obviously.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, adding in a bit of my own perspective, I've personally used drones to search and try and find and locate missing persons. So when you think of a drone in a law enforcement hand or search and rescue, I think it's a really good thing. So when I see stats like 23 police departments in the US getting drones to use, or Aerodyne, the world's largest drone group, flying over 40,000 kilometers worth of COVID missions, I think those kind of things are incredible. Positive wise, we're seeing huge number of restrictions taken back. Places like Sri Lanka and India, that have had drone restrictions that have kind of squashed some innovation, have now been lifted in order to let COVID kind of be handled. Even in Australia, we had a beyond visual line of sight exemption put in place, which meant some organizations can fly drones without having to see them. So incredible amount of innovation can come from this, which I think is just brilliant. I think we're going to see this continue for some time. The different number of companies and countries that are using drones is incredible to watch. And I guess I grabbed one snippet of a mayor in Philippines, the city of Leon, and I just wanted to read it out because it's quite interesting how he views drones within COVID. And he basically said, COVID-19 is an enemy unlike any other. We must augment traditional governance with innovation to have a better chance of defeating it. The use of drone technology intensifies our fight against COVID-19. We reduce the risk of spreading the virus, enhancing the public safety, and give assurance to the laws that are being implemented. And less interaction with crowds protects our law enforcement. And that city currently has 0 confirmed cases. So I think there is an incredible use with these. We're seeing companies innovate, and hopefully it just means good things down the track for the innovation and use of commercial and hobbyist drones. Great.
Look, I advocate for all of what you said. I definitely think we're going to see, and even as a consultant, Mike, we're starting to seek out some certified drone operators for, infrequent patrols and the like for remote sort of areas. So that technology has become available and becoming viable as well. So I definitely think from a consultant viewpoint, I do a lot in CCTV surveillance for cities. And it's something we'll be, definitely advocating over a longer term period for cities, having certain choke points that are potentially covered for thermal. You just don't know what the future is going to be like. And I think as people come out, while the numbers are lower, those deployments are viable. At least I think once you've got large crowds, probably less viable. But yeah, very interesting times in our industry. I've got one more comment before I go. Hang on a second. We've got requests coming through So I'll send some links through, guys, because there's some people asking for, can we find out more on this and this and this? So very interesting. Just for the audience, just on what we've got going with My Security Media as well. Last week, this is a good segue from last week, we ran video surveillance system standards with Vlada Damjanovski on the new, the old IECs, but the new for Australia. And then we've also, this is our 5th, I think now. We ran one on criminology. We've run one on industrial control systems with Daniel in Israel. And then we also covered off on security awareness for remote workforce. All of these videos are available on the webinar listing in our YouTube channel, My Security TV. And we also do weekly podcasts. Our latest was on going passwordless with Yubico, but we've got a number, and we have covered COVID-19 on our podcast show, including looking at national security and the implications it's going to have on the APAC and also the global environment. If you're more into the tech as well, we've got AWS, Marketplace and SAN. We have an on-demand webinar looking at a least privilege architecture in AWS. That's something you can access straight away, and that again is on the webinar page. And on June 3 with Encipher, we're looking at encryption. What you don't understand about crypto can hurt you, and I'll be hosting that with the Encipher team, and looking forward to that. I don't know a lot about encryption. It's one area of security I've always kind of stepped away from, going, that looks like maths to me. And next week, we're going to look at some endpoint security solutions with Malwarebytes. For the audience, most of you will be aware that we're growing the marketplace domain, and Malwarebytes is coming onto the marketplace, and they have a range of solutions also. The IEC 62443 Industrial Control Systems Cybersecurity Workshop is also available. Anyone who wants to sort of jump onto that, that's run by Daniel Ehrenreich out of Israel. That'll be a virtual session. Please contact me directly, but again, we're putting that up on the site. And Martin Gill, theospers.com in the UK. John, if you're not familiar with Martin Gill, these are run in British Standard Time, mate. So you don't have 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So welcome to join those. So again, look, thank you very much for the audience to come. We did have a large registration, and obviously the video will be available. So thank you very much for our panel, Darren here in Sydney, John there in southern UK, and Mike in Melbourne. Much appreciated for joining us on the virtual educational series. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure.